And on the way, you know, if you're down the slope and you have plants growing, you need to put the grass, if you're cutting the weeds, you've got to put the grass on its contour so that if rain falls, this grass is going to prevent erosion. And in this field trip, we saw that the particular person was putting it along the slope. And the professor said, this is how you should do it. And I said, sir, we do not do it so. He said, well, look and see, that's how you should do it. And it so happened that rain fell that day and we were returning. And then I said to the professor, let's stop the bus, let's look at how good it is now. And what happened, it was so heavy rain that water came and washed away all the plants and everything down into the valley. The point I'm saying here that many people teach without having the knowledge of the practice. And if you want to be good teachers, you have to have hands-on learning. Peer tutoring. This is another thing that I learned from my dad. He started in Pathshala. He got some benches. You know, we have a table and then we have something to sit on. And Dr. Singh, could you give me an idea of the time so that I know exactly where to start? He got some of the villagers, got them together, made a bench a little higher and a bench a little lower. So the kids are going to sit on the lower bench and write on the bigger bench. And he made about 4 sets of those. So now you have a different class, you take 2 of the benches and move it a little way, and students would sit there. And what he did was, the students in the advanced class, he would say, why don't you go and teach the younger kids? And in this way, you know, the best way to learn is to teach it. And in this way, we, as being some of the senior students, learn how to teach when we are very young, even before being teenagers. So senior students teaching lower level students allow for more efficient learning, and that is an important component in the SALT model. Another thing, and I know Dr. Singh criticized me very much, he said, Panditji, you got to advertise for more teachers. But he was teaching everything. He was teaching the Hindi, he was teaching multi-levels, you know, whether you're a beginner student or whether you're a junior student or whether you're a senior student, Sanskrit, you know, Hindi, philosophy, etc. So he gave me the idea that, listen, one teacher can actually run a school if they are well, knowledgeable, and educated. And so this idea of teacher facilitation, multi-level, multi-age, multi-discipline, and those are some of the core components of the SALT model. You know, it doesn't matter how old are you. And actually in the AVA school, graduation is not based on age. It is based on competencies. And so it doesn't matter how old are you. And I know, Wendy, you will have a bunch of kids who will be coming to college probably when they are 12 and 13 and 14 years old, and you have to accommodate for that. And here's another thing that I have learned from my dad, and boy, my memory goes real way back when I was young. And when I say when I was young, when I sit on a bench that was probably 1 foot high, my feet could not have touched the floor. And I used to long to see the day when my feet would touch the floor. And that is way before I am 2 years old. But in the school, what I saw my dad did, you know, we had a house in which there were, you know, we had the sail beams, and then we have the pillars, and he would write on those beams words. And this is one of the things that I remember so clearly. Education is the process that develops the potential already in man. And that is a thought that I have contemplated upon. We have the knowledge and the skill. All we have to do is to develop it. And there are many ways of doing so. And that process is what education is. The next I can remember that I saw on the walls written, service to man is service to God. And I think that has come from Mahatma Gandhi. And the last, there are many others that I can remember, but this one is education is the greatest wealth. And I could remember my dad saying to me that it is the only wealth that nobody can steal it, and the more you give it is the more you get. And when you die, it is the only wealth that goes with you. So from the early learning, we had this Pashala, that is setting up old school. And listen, my dad, as I have said, was never well educated, Western wise. But he had the stamina and the ambition to start his own school. And I think that is what has been inculcated in me so that we can start our own school. Education, children can learn before age 3. So all this idea of preschool, etc., is already embedded in that. And how to read Hindi, as I have said. But more important, storytelling. Learning through stories, which was such an important thing. Everything that he had a story for. And different levels in the same class, levels of come. And I can remember here reading, stories of Tota Maina, Pancha Tantra, Akbar Birwal, and he would relate those stories to us. And here is an important factor that contributed to this learning process. Since we had all this academic work to do, and we had all this extracurricular work to do, we had to find, and I had to find a way of learning. And so you had schoolwork. We had evening school every single day, 5 days a week. And then on Monday and Saturday, Sundays, we would go to Professor Adish's classes to do Hindi, Sanskrit and music. On Mondays, we'll go to Professor Bhattacharya's Valmiki Ramayana class. On Thursdays, we'll go to Swami Geetanand Giri's yoga class. And you had Dr. Leroy Cordell, who was a nutritionist, and he wrote many books, Eat Well and Grow Younger. We would go to his lectures too. So almost every day there was an extra place that we have to go to get some more information and education. And what was the lesson learned from that? One, the role of music in learning. Going to Professor Adish's class. Yoga and concentration in learning. Going to Swami Geetanand Giri's class. Philosophy and purpose of life in learning. In other words, you have to have a purpose to live and to learn. And if you do not have a purpose, then we will have children like Anjana coming to class and tick tick, how do we say? Texting. They're not interested in knowing. And Anjana, this is not meant for you. We have to have a purpose in life. And the most important thing is learning in the moment. And that's what the SALT model is all about, is that everything that we do, you have to learn it in class at that moment. And that's why it is so important for you to concentrate on what information is being given to you. Now, health and Ayurveda in learning. In other words, if you're not healthy, you can't learn well. And this is one of the reasons why I've gotten into Ayurveda and health. Community. My dad was not a musician, but he promoted music. He started the Navrang Orchestra. Imagine a Hindu home, an Indian home, having a steel band orchestra when we were young. Another culture. Actually, I used to play the bass sometimes. And Ramayana group, drama group. Actually, the first drama was done at the Springvale Community Center, in which the Hindi school students used to get into drama and go out and carry the message. The next, examination. We used to write examination in philosophy from South Africa. Then, they said, why do we have to write an examination from another group of people in another country? Let's start our own Hindi. And this is how the Hindi Education Board started in Trinidad. And then the idea of developing our own standard based on our own cultural environment is what I have learned from this process. And this is how the idea of having the 3-hour examination council in order to set the standards for all education coming through the SALT theory, wherever it is an idea that has been born from this experience. We got elements of the British model. I will not go through that because I told you that SALT is a synthesis of the 3 educational models: the British, the American, and the Vedic model. And this is where, in the Vedic model, which my dad was one of the proponents of, teacher facilitation, independent thinkers, discipline of body and mind, sense of purpose, universal perspective, global connectivity, intuitive learning, memory and recall, practical application. All those are. Now, elements of SALT: preparation of student to learn, design of classroom, design of curriculum, role of the teacher, presentation of subject information, assessment, and constructive distraction. And constructive distraction is, we all do not concentrate for a long time. Right, Michael? 5 minutes max, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. Your mind keeps moving. And therefore, we need to have some, what we call constructive distractions. This is why sometimes in my class, I will take a little ball, throw it to the student, give me an answer of something. What did you say? What did I say? Sevika, you remember that? So you always have to be alert. Presentation of the subject matter, assessment, and constructive distraction. We have to create our own distractions. This is the presentation of the story format, a very important part of the SALT model. And in this way, we have, this is the AVA mission, the American Vivekananda Academic Mission, to create a learning environment in which our children blossom into full human beings, demonstrating their boundless creativity and high academic standards through the development of their multiple intelligence and the process of accelerated and integrated learning that is rooted in the knowledge and experience of both Eastern and Western cultures. We hope that we will be able to formulate a school model that is duplicable, practical, and adaptable to its place of implementation and can profoundly change the way we educate our children, irrespective of the countries or cultures they come from. Now, I have a slide here, and I do not know how to get it, with some pictures of my dad. And while those are going to be played or shown, yeah, you can. I will probably ask you to ask me some questions. But I want you to know that in my early life, my dad has played a very important role in getting me to focus in knowing and learning. And that has been a great contribution of him in my life. And that contribution has allowed me to be who I am and what I do. I'm very grateful for that exposure.
moving along. So if you have questions, Pandit Ramsamooj, we will entertain them now. So everybody got very crystal clear.
If you have any questions you want to ask me, I am here. You already asked me so many questions.
Very popular.
So I have a question. Since you mentioned about my questioning about the number of teachers, you're saying that a single teacher is a essential component of salt model?
I'm not saying it is an essential, but a single teacher can run a whole school
Well,
efficiently, provided they're trained properly.
How elaborate that, please? How do you trade? I mean, I think our university has 350 teachers. I'm sure the chancellor will be very happy.
We'll have all around teaching English, math, science, history.
You see, in our school model from kindergarten, each student is going to be exposed to every discipline and be proficient in those. And therefore, as a teacher, they will be able to transmit that over to the student. Okay? Now, take for example, these days, most of the teaching I'm doing at the APA school. All right? My English is tied in with my mathematics. The mathematics is tied in with the biology and the chemistry and the social studies. Now, if you have different teachers, they are not able to tie all of those things together in terms of the comprehension of the subject matter for the student. And therefore, a single teacher in a single grade level, and that's where I think I really want to do here, that each level of competencies, there would be a major teacher being responsible for all the subject matter being done at that particular level. So if it is level 1 or level K or level 2 or level 3 or level 4, there would be one teacher responsible for coordinating all of that information. But they can have, let's say, a teacher in chemistry or a teacher in physics, bringing in that information into the classroom for variety. But there's one teacher who's going to be responsible for each child having the knowledge base of that particular discipline. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think you did answer the question. I still want to have follow-up, but let me allow some other people who may have questions. I'll start with that.
Were your ancestors from India?
Yes, my ancestors are from India.
And who was the first person from your family to come to India?
Listen, that is, I think we have some difficulty in determining that. But what I do know is that my dad's father, Ramsamooj, he had come from India. But then other limbs of the family, let's say my mother's, they are 4 or 5 generations, before their parents came. So if you have to determine what is our generation, we can't say it is 2 generations, but basically taking everything in consideration, it is 4 or 5 generations away.
Any other questions before I do my follow-up? So what I understand from you is saying that I have 2 questions. Number one, I want to clarify what you're saying, that you need to have a teacher who will be in charge of tying one subject with the other subject.
Right.
Whereas the subject teachers can be experts. But you still want, and that teacher will be sitting there in the class all the time.
All the time.
Okay, that's very important. I believe that's the kind of model even we are doing, successful model, because we do teach multidisciplinary courses. And one of the problems, for example, we have sustainability program, which is multidisciplinary course. One of the problems that I have pointed out is that we have individual experts in different fields, say engineering or business or sciences or humanities, and they come and they teach their part, but there is nobody who integrates. So that it has to be done in two ways. Either I have to work with every teacher. If I'm expert in chemistry, I have to work with every professor who is going to teach. We have to sit down together so that I can do the tying up. Or there has to be somebody else sitting in the class as an instructor who can then connect all the things. I think students lose if this connection is not made. So I kind of agree with you on that. My question to you is that it's maybe easier to do it up to maybe in high school. What about university level, higher education?
Listen, the higher education, that is also going to be a model that could be followed. And this is why I think we have to change the way that we educate students at the university level. And in that, we have got the level 5 in the AVA school model, and the level 6 and the level 7, in which it is just a continuation of what we do in the lower grade. The only thing that we are going now in depth in each subject area. But it is important, very important to make connection. Connectivity is so important in the learning process. And without it, we will lose our kids. Because some people will do some calculus and have no idea what it relates to statistics. They do. The kids ask me, how are we going to measure the amount of birds in the forest? How are we going to? Well, you know, David said, well, we'll go to combat. Where are you going to fly them? You know, how many animals in the forest? You have to now go through a process of estimation and all those things, which gives a whole different way of counting and getting numbers. And this is when we talked about, what day was it? Monday? When we talked about the 7th billionth person on Earth. It was yesterday. So I think what Dean Hogan said was you were quite aware of what has been happening there. But then how do you go about counting? Who's the 7 billion? You can't do that. So you have to figure out a way how to be estimating. And you have to connect everything. We must do that, otherwise we are not going to be efficient in our learning. You know, long ago, and I always use this reference, we had 2 farm boys who were not engineers. They were farmers in the fields of the Midwest that made the aircraft, the Wright brothers, and flew it. Now, how did they come up with this idea? They did not do aeronautics engineering and all this big calculus and so forth. They used common sense, and they used their experiences from the farm and machinery and all those things, and then came up with an idea. That's what we have to do. And in the 21st century, that is knowledge-based. If you have to become an employer, and the AVA school model is designed to create independent thinkers, not employees, but employers. And for that, you have to be able to come up with something new. You have to think differently, and you have to have a very wide base of information for you to be able to get
Do you think that we nowadays being so dependent on technology and everything at our fingertips and at a touch of a button, do you think that is reducing the common sense? Because people are not using like the hands-on experience you're saying. Everything they think is just turning on something with a button.
Yeah.
Not really trying to do it themselves.
That's a defect in our learning model now. You know, we think we just Google something. I have some students, I give them an exercise, and they copy everything from Google. They're not thinking, you know, and much of the information is wrong. They have to start thinking. So what education is going to be? It's not knowledge or facts. It is how you're going to interpret those facts. Education has to be more on how to apply that information and how to discriminate between information that not be right or information that not be truthful. We have to now learn how to learn and how to decipher things, because everybody is saying something that is not right. And how are you going to discriminate on that? So you have to have that base again. Again, grounded in sound principles, whether they be scientific principles or social principles, so that you're now working from the base upwards. And then you will see that the content